Hello, my name is Asun López Varela, and I am associate professor at Universidad Complutense Madrid. It's my pleasure to deliver this lecture for the Eurasia Foundation series of lectures. And I'm going to be talking to you about mirrors in literature and the arts, the past and the present, through the looking glass. So let's start with the etymology of the term. Mirror comes from speculum, which has produced a number of interesting words in English and other Western languages. For example, the word spectacles is not just the old name for glasses, but is a term used in relation to performance, as well as inquiry and speculation. A spectacle and speculate come from the same root. Looking glass comes from Old English, glass, and Germanic root related to glow, gold, glisten, according to the classic dictionary of Liddell and Scott. Henry George Liddell, the co-author of this famous Greek-English lexicon, which is still in use, was Alice Liddell's father, and Alice Liddell was the real Alice in Wonderland in Lewis Carroll's story. You can see her portrait there with Lewis Carroll. Right, so the history of mirrors is fascinating and spans thousands of years. The earliest mirrors were made of glass, were not made of glass, but they were polished metal surfaces. And materials such as obsidian, which was a volcanic kind of glass, were used. Polished metal, copper and bronze. And some of these mirrors date back to 6,000 years before Common Era. The ancient Egyptians are credited with creating some of the earliest known mirrors. They were flat, polished copper ones from 4,000 years before Common Era. And then during the Bronze Age, they began to be manufactured out of bronze and also created by a combination of copper and tin. And you can see there some of these objects from different museums. An interesting one is the Ankh mirror, which we will comment and talk about later on. So mirrors have played a significant role in art, in science, and in culture throughout history. They are optical instruments. They're gradually made of glass lenses, and they were used for example, in the camera oscura, which was one of the instruments that painters used in the past. And this kind of ways of looking at things through mirrors had an important impact on human understanding of the world. In particular, we can mention how this painting by Jan van Eyck is known as the Arnolfini portrait of the marriage of this young couple, had a very important impact on Victorian pre-Raphaelite brotherhood. In the painting, you can see there is a convex mirror in the background, and it hanging between the couple, and it symbolizes different aspects of the painting. For example, the idea of vanity and self-awareness, but also is a visual metaphor of the presence of witnesses during the marriage ceremony. And the painter was very careful to paint detailed images within the mirror. If you look at it in close examination, you can see two figures at the doorway who were supposed to be the witnesses or bystanders to the wedding ceremony. And as I have mentioned, this painting had an impact on the visual language of the pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood, which was established in 1848 by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, William Holman Hunt, and John Everett Millais. These artists were contemporaries of Lewis Carroll, and he photographed them. The real name of Lewis Carroll was Charles Ludwig Dodgson, and interesting that his pseudonym is a mirror inversion of his Latin name, Carolus Louis. So he created Lewis Carroll. And there on your screen, you can see some of the photographs of his friends from the Pre-Raphaelite circle, and some other important Victorians, such as the poet Alfred Lord Tennyson, or the critic John Ruskin. We will talk about Tennyson and about some of these Pre-Raphaelite artists in the course of this lecture. The study of optics, including the behavior of light and reflection, was crucial, both in art and in photography. We will get to photography later on. Artists and photographers alike sought to understand how to light interact with surfaces, and included mirrors. You can see there the painting of Velázquez, Las Meninas, at the Prado Museum in Madrid. And next to the door, which is open in the background, you can see what it looks like a painting, but it's a mirror that reflects the king and the queen, who are actually looking at the scene that is being painted. So we have Velázquez himself there painting. We have the little girls, Las Meninas, and all the family environment of the court, of the Spanish court, you know. The mirror here creates, together with the door open, creates the perspective and also the use of color, no, in the painting. So mirrors were used to create the framing, the perspective, and the depth of paintings, no? And also they were used by early photographers like Robert Cornelius, who used mirrors to capture some of the earliest selfies. The exploration of reflection and distortion through mirrors was also carried on to experiments in photography and in painting, as we will see. So one of the most important statements on the mirror as an instrument that contributes to visualize the world in different ways is Leonardo da Vinci's Trattato della Pintura. You can see there's some of the illustrations also from the Codex Atlanticus, where he draws the camera oscura, no, which was used by Leonardo and by other painters to paint. It was a box with a hole and a mirror, so you could see the objects or the scenery that you were going to paint from different vantage points, no? And this statement in his Trattato acknowledges the necessity to use the mirror, no? When you're painting, you should take a flat mirror and often look at your work within it, and it will then be seen in reverse and will appear to be by the hand of some other master, and you will be able to better judge its faults than in any other way. So this idea of otherness of the mirror, opening up spaces of otherness, is one of the aspects that we will explore in this lecture. So how about Victorian society? In Victorian society, mirrors were often used as symbols of vanity and self-reflection, because there was a huge emphasis on personal appearance and etiquette. And mirrors also place importance on the preoccupation with the self-image, but not only with the physical appearances, but also tied to the idea of introspection, self-examination, exploration of the psyche, and so on. No? They were used to reflect the dual nature of individuals and highlight contrasts between public and private personas, much like paintings. Remember Dorian Gray, famous portrait of Dorian Gray, no, Oscar Wilde's novel. So Victorian artists frequently use mirrors as a means of conveying moral and social commentary as well. And they were interested in experimenting with mirrors as technical devices, no, to demonstrate the play between light and shadow, which is one of the topics that we will talk about during this lecture, no. The mirror was also used as a narrative device because, as we have seen, it can extend in a painting, for example, the what is in the painting, no, to provide other elements of to the story, and also insights into the characters' thoughts and emotions. And you have there the image of Tinkerbell from James Matthew Barrie novel Peter Pan. This is the Disney version, and Tinkerbell is, of course, a fairy, so it's a kind of a magic creature. And we will see in this lecture that many magic creatures, divine figures, and goddesses as well, mythological creatures, particularly women, came into the human world through mirrors. So it's interesting how the mirror has also these magic properties that we will explore. So as I mentioned, they became very fashionable in Victorian homes. Rossetti owned 24 mirrors, 9 of which were convex. You have there on your left a convex mirror owned by Dante Gabriel Rossetti in his Kelmscott Manor. And convex mirror offer a different perspective to flat mirrors, no? And in the middle of your screen, you see Lady Lilith, which is one of the paintings by Rossetti. And Lilith, was Adam's first wife. And of course, she's holding the mirror because, as I mentioned, these magic creatures and goddesses and mythological creatures came into the world through mirrors or through water, reflective surfaces like water, for example. So there's also a sonnet that Rossetti composed on Lilith, which I have copied an extract for you, and explains a little bit who Lilith was, but we will talk about Lilith a little bit more also in this lecture, no? So of Adam's first wife, Lilith, it is told, the witch he loved before the gift of Eve. So Lilith was the witchy, the fallen woman, the new woman that was challenging masculinity, no? There's the snake, her sweet tongue could deceive. So she was also compared to the snake because of her way of speaking. And we will see later some images of Lilith as the snake. And her enchanted hair was the first gold. And still she sits young while the earth is old. And subtly of herself contemplative draws men to watch the bright web she can weave, till heart and body and life are in its hold. So the idea of weaving, these goddesses weaving life and death, and living between these two worlds, and having a powerful influence on men, no? So they were these powerful women associated also to Lilith. As we have mentioned, the mirrors are prevalent in Pre-Raphaelite art, and they often reflect another portion of the room, but we also have these magical mirrors that open up new dimensions and spaces. And I told you that I was going to talk very briefly about Alfred Lord Tennyson's poem, The Lady of Shalott, that has as protagonist a lady who is doomed to view life through a mirror that shows hazy reflections of real life. And if she dares to stop looking, the mirror cracks and the course kills her. So you can see this in William Holman Hunt's sketch below. No, she's trapped. She's weaving, and she's looking through this mirror to the world outside. No, she can never get out. And in contrast, Alice in Wonderland actually enters her mirror. You have their tennial illustration of the first edition of Alice in Wonderland. And in this world across the mirror, she experiences a different space-time reality. See, these are some stanzas from The Lady of Shalott by Lord Alfred Tennyson. And you have an illustration also of the Lady of Shalott looking at Lancelot by one of the Pre-Raphaelites, John William Waterhouse. And you can see the mirror, of course. You can see how the lady is weaving, but she's trapped in the threads of life, and she cannot get into this other world across the mirror. Let me just read the last stanza. You can listen to the whole poem recited and with music by Lorena McKennitt. It's worth listening to in YouTube. But in her web she still delights to weave the mirror magic sides, for often through the silent nights a funeral with plumes and lights and music went to Camelot. Or when the moon was overhead, came two young lovers lately wed. I am half sick of shadows, said the Lady of Shalott. So the idea of the association of many of these fairy women to the moon, it's also persistent in the paintings and in the literature. This is the wood engraving for Holman Hunt's illustration for Tennyson's collection of poems, which was known as the Moxon. It was published by Edward Moxon, the Moxon Tennyson. And it was a preparatory sketch, and then the real painting on your right, which shows the lady which is trapped in this mirror, in this other reality. Coming back to Lewis Carroll, in Alice Adventures in Wonderland, in the sequel, Through the Looking Glass and What Alice Found There, Alice lands in a world which is mapped as a chess game. And the chess game has some mirror qualities, no? We have these figures which are white, we have these figures which are black, and they're the same on either side of the chessboard, no? And as Alice crosses to this world at the other side of the mirror, space-time is inverted, so as she tries to reach, to come back to her own world, everything works in reverse, no? And it's interesting that we have here some paintings by Lewis Carroll in which show his interest in mirror-like experiences. In one of the photographs that he did we have the two sisters, his sisters Margaret and Henrietta, playing chess, and they are mirror images of each other with a similar hairstyle and the chessboard. And in the other painting, in the other picture, the other photograph, which is entitled Reflection, you can see Margaret looking at herself in the mirror. No, it's interesting that these first daguerreotypes were also termed mirrors of memory. And as we mentioned, Lewis Carroll was very, very fond of photography. So his contemporaries, as we have said, they were very interested in mirrors, and the looking glass frequently appears in many paintings. Also appears in the writings by Christina Rossetti. in this volume called Speaking Likeness. So the idea of the mirror and the analogy, the likeness, how something is like something else, it's one of the themes that is going to run through our lecture as well. And on your right, you have Circe by John William Waterhouse. She's offering the cup to Odysseus, and you can see Odysseus reflected in the mirror. And one of his mariners, one of his men, turned into a pig at the feet of the goddess. No. So we're going to be talking about literature, we're going to be talking about photography, we're going to be talking about painting in this lecture, and how the use of the mirror and lenses in general are very much part of art in general. No, you have there the history of photography in a snapshot. The camera oscura, which was invented in 1021, and in 2000 the first camera phone. So we're going to end this lecture talking about photography in 3D photography and in our contemporary world. No. The fascination with the looking glass, with lenses and with mirrors and shadows, the light and shadow, it's very, very ancient. And we can find it in one of the earliest examples is the Republic by Plato in book 7, where he has the analogy of the cave and the idea that the realm of the forms is the world of light, is the world of what seems to be the real world, but this is illusory, and that the real world, the truth, it's in the world of ideas, and that what we are looking at are really shadows of this world. No, so it's almost like the reflection of the mirror. Plato brings this topic in several of his dialogues, as we will see. But before we get to that, I want to mention how communication is related to making analogies, making connections, okay? Because I'm going to try to connect the mirror to analogic processes. So communication is a system that is staging different degrees of contextual, in other words, that occur at a particular space and time, connections. So depending on the type of communication, whether it's happening now and so it's oral communication happening at this moment, or it's written communication, the context is different, no? But in either case, we're making connection, we're making analogies that create frequently a story, a narrative, no? Not always. As we will see, there are some artistic forms that seek to break these analogic patterns in order to make us question or inquire about knowledge and about how we think about the world, no? So connections are happening when we are posting our selfie in social networks, and people are commenting and giving likes or dislikes to, well, never dislikes to our image and to our postings, no? So the allegory of the cave is the idea that reality is beyond this world, beyond the world of senses, that there is a divine world of ideas that can only be reached by remember intuitions and in dreams. And the dream is again going to be related here to mirrors in this lecture, as we will see later. No? So we have here two quotations from two dialogues by Plato, one by the Tetetus and the other one by the Timaeus. In the Tetetus, which is one of the oldest dialogues as well, we have the conception of the dream. No, here so we have Socrates talking to Tetetus, and he's questioning Tetetu's ideas about knowledge acquisition, and he's highlighting how knowledge can also come from intuitions and dreams, no? And he says, he thought that I too had a dream, and I heard in my dream that the primeval letters or elements out of which you and I and all other things are compounded have no reason or explanation. So they come from sort of a divine magic environment, these letters, which are also likened, they're compared to elements. And this is more explicit in the Timaeus, where he actually talks about the elements of the universe and the first syllables. And Plato is talking about the creation of the world out of fire, water, air, and earth. So the four elements, and how the creator is mixing and replicating and dividing the whole into parts. So the idea of unity and multiplicity within the one, the whole within the whole, this divine entity which is composed of a fragmentation of a multiplicity of things, no? And how things, all this fragmentation, all these things are created by recursion, by analogic pattern repetition. So if you want to learn a little bit more about this, the recommended book is Joanna Drucker, The Alphabetic Labyrinth. So recursion is a process in which involves invoking the procedure of repetition itself, no? And here are some examples, like the Majorca dolls or the Sierpinski triangle, which is forms, they're geometrical forms that are repeated, and they create what is called in geometry a fractal geometry. For example, the snow is made of these little crystals which are repeated, and it seems to be to have no shape. But when you look at it in a microscope, you can see that there are tiny, tiny crystals that are repeated and in recursive format, no? So another example is the Fibonacci sequence, which is a numerical sequence, but it also in geometry has the shape of the spiral, and we're going to be mentioning the spiral later because it's one of the figures of the labyrinth as well. Another example is the recursive sequence of windows in Microsoft, for example, when you open several windows and you get this effect. You can get the recursive sequence with mirrors. And an example also made into a movie is directed by Christopher Nolan, and is Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio. So recursion is part of one of the patterns of analogic structures. And analogic structures can take the form of language, but can also take the form of mirror structures, as we will see. And they occur in the world, in nature. They are part of the way we think. Our brain works by making analogic connections against the digital ones of the computer. And also in languages, because most of the alphabets are also, they also work following analogic structures. So you have their genetic code, DNA, you have the Fibonacci sequence, which appears, for example, in flowers and in crystals, and some examples of early glyphs and Minoic writing. In the brain, analogical reasoning is the ability to find correspondences between physical entities and abstract entities. So it creates relationships to support knowledge acquisition, and in order to visualize things that we we cannot explain very clearly, we use analogies. And for example, the idea that the brain is like a computer, or that the mouse that we use in the computer is like a real mouse. These are analogies, no, that are used in everyday life. The idea of analogical reasoning, has been explored in neuroscience. You have there one reference from developmental science journal, in case you want to read more about it. It's interesting that even our brain is analogic. It has like two mirror sides, no? One the right and one the right. The right and the left sides are like mirror sides of the brain, and they are specialized in different aspects. One is more analytical, mathematical, logical, and so on, and the other side, it's more emotional, intentional, non-verbal intelligence, perceptual, like color perception and so on. And scientists have explored that it's more attributed to the female gender, no? The left side of the brain, while the right side is more like masculine, more masculine qualities. But of course, this is all debatable, no? Um, Also, evidence from analogy and how our way of thinking about language and numbers, and it's spatial. It follows orientation in space. It comes from synesthesia, how we can transfer perceptual aspects from one type of perception to another, no? So, for example, how many mental pictures are experienced in sequences, and spatial configurations move from bottom up, for example, as numbers increase. No, so we tend to see numbers moving up, or also depending on the culture, in Western cultures, from right, from left to right or right to left, depending on how on the direction of the writing systems, no? And this is known as the snark effect. And it's interesting that the name also makes allusion to one of the nonsense poems by Lewis Carroll, which is The Hunting of the Snark. So let's go back now. I have talked a little bit about analogy and how I'm going to try to connect this to the mirror. And so I go back now to mirrors and how they are also related to water-like surfaces, no? So one of the first mirroring scenarios appears in Ovid's book 3 of his Metamorphoses, with the story of Narcissus, which you have illustrated there by Caravaggio on your screen. And the idea is to show that mirrors not only present the figure of the person. They were used for personal hygiene, also for aesthetic purposes. But importantly, as I've mentioned before, they also they were considered to have magic properties, and to mediate between this space, our reality, and other realities. This is one of the topics that we will bring up in the lecture, no? You have there, for example, a quotation from St. Paul, no, in his letter to the Corinthians. We see now through a looking glass in a dark manner, but then we will see face to face. This idea of the dark manner, no, because of ancient looking glasses were not made of glass, but they were made of metal, dark metal reflective surfaces. And the idea of the dark mirror, it's again one of the things that we will talk about in a minute, no? And you have an illustration there of a mirror from the New Kingdom in Egypt. surfaces with water, mirrors. We have some illustrations here from the Pre-Raphaelites again, William Waterhouse, who painted Echo and Narcissus. And he also has several paintings of mermaids, no? Interesting that these creatures are also in between worlds, as we will see. We have mentioned that some ancient mirrors were made of metals, and of course silver was a very valuable metal, and it was associated, as we mentioned, to feminine deities and to the moon, no? And many mythological goddesses came into our world through these mirror surfaces, including water, no? The case of Venus, we have there the painting by Botticelli, The Birth of Venus, and we have another painting by William Waterhouse there of Circe also, with the image of the water, the crystal, and almost like a crystal ball, no? Magic crystal ball. And of course, Harry Potter cannot, we cannot avoid talking about how the mirror in some cases does not reflect some persons who may not have a soul, so it doesn't provide a specular reflection, and this is the case of vampires or some other figures as in Harry Potter, no? And also an interesting scholarly book, it's the Golden Bough, a study of comparative religion, where Sir James Fraser speaks of mirrors as both shadows and reflections of the other side. They were using divination. The crystal ball can also be considered a kind of sort of a mirror, no? And notice also the etymology of the term divination, divinare, which is connected both to the idea of the divine, but also as an inquiry in, the magical inquiry into divining what it lies at the other side, no? So all this connects, of course, to Platonism as well, no? Or Neoplatonism. And so again, more examples of how the mirror was used in religion and in magic ceremonies in antiquity. And here we have the myth of Osiris. We have the two sisters, the twin sisters, again, mirror images. Isis and her twin are using a looking glass to reflect Horus' eye, which symbolize clairvoyance. And you have there some of these Egyptian carvings, which illustrate Isis and Nephthys, and they are resuscitating Osiris. And Isis is usually holding the Ankh. The Ankh was considered to be the key of life, but it was often a mirror, as you can see there in the illustrations, no? So of course the mirror, providing the path to the other side, to death. Moving from Egypt to Babylonia, we have the goddess Lamastu, or Lamia, in the Greek world. They were vampiric figures. They began to be seen as monsters, female monsters, female demons, and they often came into the world through mirrors. And notice how they were also associated to mermaids and sirens, because they often had a body covered with scales like fish and wings sometimes. And they were, of course, connected to Lilith, whom we have already mentioned. Lilith was the earlier, the Babylonian goddess Ishtar or Inanna, Astarte, who was also the goddess of life and death. And notice how she, in this very ancient carving, she appears holding a similar object to the Ankh key, the Egyptian one. And Lilith appears in the legendary, in many Celtic traditions, in the as well, and she came into the world, as I mentioned, through mirrors. You have there the illustration, the painting by Michelangelo at the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican, where Lilith is portrayed as the snake tempting Adam and Eve, no? And we have mentioned she was, in Kabbalistic belief, she was Adam's first wife, and she was dismissed by Adam because she was too, um, she wanted to be like him, and she was too powerful, so to say. Okay, and well, many looking glasses, black looking glasses, I wanted to talk about black looking glasses, are mentioned by Pliny the Elder, for example, in his Naturalis Historia. The idea of the black looking glass, because we've mentioned that the earliest mirrors were made of black metals that reflected a little bit. It was used, as we have pointed out, in magic and in ancient religious ceremonies connected to death. And here you have an image of John Dee, who was advisor to Queen Elizabeth I, and he owned a black glass, which was called a cloth glass, and it's at the Science Museum in London. It was believed to be owned by Dee. And then the crystal on the right, on the other side, which is also at the Science Museum, and this was there is evidence that it was owned by Dee because there's written evidence. Dee claimed that it was given to him by an angel, Angel Uriel, who instructed him to make the Philosopher's Stone, of course, which was the ultimate goal of any alchemist, no? And Dee believed that this crystal had the ability, this glass had the ability to contact angels and spirits, and that they dictated several books to him, no? And of course, the Black Mirror, Netflix series, which has a connection to all this, and because it's a series that shows us how screen technologies have an impact in our lives. So it's giving us the other side of the black side of technology. We will come back to this topic later on. So, of course, the mirror is associated with superstition. The Romans learned new ways of making mirrors by coating blown glass with molten lead or tin, and creating the reflected surface on the back of the glass. And they, like the Greeks, they believed that the gods could observe their souls through these devices. So this is the reason why to damage a mirror was considered disrespectful, because it would bring bad luck to the person who broke the mirror. So you have there some illustrations of people using mirrors in Greco-Roman times, no? So the broken mirror, 7 years bad luck, no? There are also gender issues associated to mirrors, as we have seen, and connected, of course, to appearance, to aging. You have here a link to a YouTube video of Sylvia Plath's poem, Mirror, which discusses the emotional effect of time and appearance. And the woman in the poem is looking at the mirror in an effort to find who she is. And it's worth listening to this recitation in Poetry Channel in YouTube. And of course, the other image is from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Disney production of the magic mirror on the wall, no, and how the witch queen wants to be forever young. So we have already talked about the relationship between mirrors, technology, lenses. You have here two interesting reads on the mirror, the Histoire de Miroir by Sabine Mencher-Bonnet, and an essay by J.M. Enoch from 2006, which talk about the importance of optical instruments in expanding human vision and also changing, having an impact on epistemology, on the way we think about knowledge and how we think about the world. And this is something that's a topic that has also been in Timothy Rice's research, where he talks about how the discovery of optic technologies like the telescope or the microscope have had an impact on the way we look at reality, and bringing the empirical method of the empirical approach to science, for example. No? Okay, and just to give you an example of what is called a smart mirror technology in shopping experiences today, no? And remember that the screen devices that we're using, like computers or tablets or mobile phones, are in fact mirror optical devices, no? So now let's look at what some of the most prominent scholars say about the video, about the mirror. And I have some quotations from Michel Foucault, who talks about otherness, the otherness of the mirror, not in the other spaces, the space autre. And he uses Velázquez's painting Las Meninas in order to talk about how the mirror reflects these other realities, this otherness. No, this is the quote. The mirror is, after all, a utopia, since it is a placeless place. In the mirror, I see myself there where I am not, in an unreal virtual space that opens up behind the surface. I'm over there where I am not, a sort of shadow that gives my own visibility to myself, that enables me to see myself there where I am absent. Such is the utopia of the mirror. But it is also a heterotopia, insofar as the mirror does not exist in reality, where it exerts a sort of counteraction on the position that I occupy. From the standpoint of the mirror, I discover my absence from the place where I am, since I see myself over there. Starting from this gaze that is, as it were, directed towards me from the ground of this virtual space that is on the other side of the glass, I come back to myself. I begin again to direct my eyes towards myself and to reconstitute myself there where I am. The mirror functions as a heterotopia in this respect. It makes this place that I occupy at the moment when I look at myself in the glass at once absolutely real, connected with all the space that surrounds it, and absolutely unreal, since in order to be perceived, it has to pass through this virtual point, which is over there. So the same could be said about the selfies that we take with our mobile devices, no? And we also have this quotation about recursion, about the fold, coming from Deleuze, no? Deleuze explores in this book, The Fall, the story of painting, and in a number of lectures that he delivered at the University of Vincennes, and they are they were published in this book, in this volume, and he talks about the Baroque in this way. No, if the Baroque establishes a total art or a unity of the art, it does so of all in extension, each art tending to be prolonged and even to be prolonged in the next art, which exceeds the one before. So we have remarked that the Baroque often confines paintings to retoubles, but it does so because the painting exceeds its frame. Remember, the retouble can have three parts, no? And it is realized in a polychrome marble sculpture, no? Sometimes they are a sculpture, part of a sculpture. And the sculpture goes beyond itself by being achieved in architecture. So it's part of an architectural environment. And in turn, architecture discovers a frame in the facade. But the frame itself becomes detached from the inside and establishes relationship with the surroundings. So the idea of these multiple frames, these multiple mirrors, this idea of recursion, as he described the unity and the multiplicity within the Baroque. And it's interesting that he calls it the fold, and how, and this can be also compared to one of the metaphors that Lewis Carroll uses in his story of Alice, and which gives title to Martin Gatnes, who is one of the most important critics, scholars on Lewis Carroll, no? And his book, The Universe in a Handkerchief. The handkerchief is appears in Carroll's story as a fold, something folded. And also it's a symbol, of course, for the gay and queer community at the time of when Carroll was writing. So a very interesting connection there. And we have some quotations from Umberto Eco, from his Trattato di Semiotica Generale, where he talks about the mirror, and he questions whether it's a sign or what kind of thing it is, no? And he says the following: not only can it not be properly called an image, since it is a virtual image and therefore not a material expression, but even granted the existence of the image, it must be admitted that it does not stand for something else. On the contrary, it stands in front of something else. It exists not instead of, but because of the presence of that something. When that something disappears, the pseudo image in the mirror disappears too. So in his novel, The Name of the Rose, he also claims that in order for there to be a mirror of the world, it is necessary that the world has a form. So the form, it's given prior to the idea. Interesting connection here again to Plato. So the mirror and the flat mirror and other kinds of mirrors, the convex mirror and anamorphosis. This was discovered while painters were working on perspective, and they began to incorporate it in some of their paintings. It was to play with a curved mirror, a convex mirror. And we have here two of the famous anamorphic paintings. One is by William Scrotts. It's the image of Edward VI. And another one by Holbein, The Ambassadors. It has a memento mori, the skull, and the anamorphic skull in the foreground. And it's pointed there with an arrow so that you can see it, because it's not very clear, no? Anamorphic experiments were also performed by Escher, the Dutch graphic artist, and you have here some examples. And it's, again, a way of looking at analogy and breaking analogy through mirrors, no, inspired by mirrors. So we have seen so far that mirrors are optic instruments, that they represent a double articulation of analogy, double or multiple, because we can use, we can mount several mirrors to make this, create distortions, no? And that curved mirrors, mirrors that have the shape of a ball, like a magic ball, also might create ambiguity in representation. And this is, of course, something that writers and artists are going to explore. And even in flat mirrors, perspective depends on the observer's position, okay? And when I left, when I here in the lecture, if I write if I lift my right hand, you're going to see it on the left. And when I'm talking about the figures on my PowerPoint, I say they are on the right. There was some image, but you're going to see it on the left. So the computer is also a mirror, okay? So I want to show some examples of how art plays with this and sometimes attempts to break this analogy. Remember, we've mentioned that analogy processes are part of our world. Our world works by means of recursion, repetition of analogies or similarities. And but artists are going to try to break this. And one example is, of course, Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky, which is a poem that appears in Through the Looking Glass. The version that Jan Svankmajer makes of this poem by Carroll, it's a small short movie. And Simon Biggs also created an installation working with computers in Read, which is also inspired by Jabberwocky and by the Alice novel. And we're going to look very briefly at HBO production Westworld. So I'm going to go, I have to go quickly through this because the lecture is already very long, but you have the PowerPoint and you can look at it in more detail if you wish. So the idea of mirrors is everywhere in Alice. The idea of the complexity of the mirror and the complexity of the path of how things are not what they seem, that things are not in a straight line, and that things are like a corkscrew, like complex. And to mention that Lewis Carroll has also inspired the work of the scientist Douglas Hofstadter, whose book is listed there in case you are interested in reading Gödel, Escher, and Bach, where he compares Gödel, who was the scientist who discovered time travel backwards, Escher, the artist that I have mentioned before, and of course music, Bach. Interesting combination. This is Jabberwocky, and the idea of this monster who is being, the monster is language, of course, and it's being destroyed by Alice in the movie, in also some kind of hero, masculine hero in the original poem. And language is broken, the words are broken and created in fuse again to create new words. No? So it's a way of breaking analogy and provide mirror structures in language which are obscure. They're black mirror structures, if you wish. No, however, when Carroll does this, the new words that he creates have they have more echoes. They have a multiplicity of meaning in each of the units, in each of the words, no? And this has, of course, inspired many artists, many writers like James Joyce, Finnegan's Wake, and so on. I don't have time to get into it. interesting for you to look at. It's the documentary version or film version of Jabberwocky by Svankmajer from 1973. It's a criticism of Victorian society using puppets. And puppets are mirror-like structures of humans. You know, they are dolls, but they imitate the human. So we can consider them like mirrors, no? And you have a mashup version, a mixture there created by my daughter, which is shorter than it's speeded up. Svankmajer version is 13 minutes long, and this is less than 5 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, I think. So you can get an idea of what we're talking about, no? Simon Biggs created in 2009 an interactive installation which uses a mirror and inscribes the human figure into writing. But you'll have to do this by looking backwards, using a mirror to look at the screen behind, you know. So again, it's playing with the idea of the inscription and the mirror and how we look at things, and breaking analogy, of course, trying to explore new worlds. And Westworld. Westworld is very much inspired by Alice in Wonderland. You have a video there, a link to one of the scenes where Dolores, who is one of the protagonists, it's given the book Alice in Wonderland to read, and the scene talks about transformation. For those who have not seen Westworld, is a dystopian science fiction series created by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, based on the novel by Michael Crichton, and it's about an amusement park in the West, in the Wild West, and it's populated by androids, and they're called the hosts. And the guests are going into the park to play with these hosts. But as it is the Wild West, well, the hosts end up being raped, being killed, and so on. No. One of the oldest hosts in the park is Dolores. Her name in Spanish means pain and grief. And Dolores is the farmer's daughter, and she's repeatedly raped. And this is an interesting connection, because it is through pain that the hosts learn, acquire sentience. They learn about their true identity. They learn that they are androids. There are many comparisons, as I said, to Alice in Wonderland. Anthony Hopkins is Robert Ford, and he's the co-founder and park director of Westworld, and he's the White Rabbit. And you can see there's some images that are show the similarities. And the key, it's one of the aspects, one of the things that remember the Ankh, the Egyptian Ankh key, which was a mirror. Well, the key is what Dolores is looking for, like Alice, you know, remember in the first novel, trying to become big and small to get the key and open the door to get to the other side, to get to the other reality. So one of the constant topics in Westworld is reality part of dreams? Are dreams the real? Or is the real life our real reality, or is the reality in our dreams? No, remember Socrates talking about this as well in the Teteto, by Plato's dialogue. And another one of the quotes that is constantly repeated in the series is, "What is the nature of your reality?" So the idea of the dream and reality is because the androids are programmed when they are asleep. So their memories are erased so that they don't remember the horrible things that happened to them. They were shot, they were raped in the case of Dolores, and the memories are erased in their sleep. This goes back to mythology. There's very many connections to ancient Greek ideas about what dream was and so on, which I don't have time to mention. But in any case, with the mirror is the idea that we have like these two realities, and that Dolores, like Alice, notice how similar the dress that she's wearing in the movie is very much like Alice's own dress, no? How she has to learn about herself through all this pain to find the key. The key is the labyrinth. Remember, we were talking about the labyrinth before, and the Fibonacci series, and how to escape into what she thinks is the real reality. Okay, but this is not so easily done. And again, some more images here about the maze, the labyrinth in Alice in Wonderland, and how it is also associated to water. Notice we talked about this before, no? Water, the labyrinth, and how to escape through the mirror. And also like a game, to escape from dream and reality. And games are very much part of Alice in Wonderland and of Westworld as well. And reflections, mirror images are constantly appearing in Westworld in comparison to Alice in Wonderland as well. And the idea of the mirror image, for example, the guests are given a hat when they come into the amusement park. They can choose between being bad and pick the black hat, or being good and pick the white hat. But it turns out that this differentiation is not really there in the end. What seems good might be bad, and what seems bad might be good. So it's more complex than that. This is an image of Bernard, who is the head of the programming division. He's the one working with Dolores, for example, reprogramming her and other androids. And he also has these dreams of his past, a past which he thinks is real, and in fact is real. But it turns out that Bernard is also an android in the end. I'm sorry for the spoiler, no? So, and he's one of the memories he has of his dying son, and he's reading to him Alice in Wonderland, Alice Adventures in Wonderland, quoting, if I had a world of my own, everything will be nonsense, nothing will be what it is, because everything will be what it isn't. Of course, he wants to turn the world around the other side because his son is dying, so, he wants to have some hope, no? And we also have a quotation here by Robert Ford, Anthony Hopkins. There are many quotations that echo Carol's books. This one, dreams mean everything that they are the stories we tell ourselves of what could be, who we could become. No? So the idea of how we can experience otherness, how we can be other things through dreams, through mirror images, is very much present in this series as well. And as I said, the key is grief, the pain, the dying, the descent into the underworld, the dying so that we can be reborn. And you have some quotations there from some of the main characters. In the case of Dolores, for example, you think the grief will make you smaller inside, like your heart will collapse in on itself, but it doesn't. I feel spaces opening up inside of me, like a building with rooms I've never explored. So it is the grief, it is the pain that through which Dolores, the android, acquires sentience, acquires self-consciousness. The series is very complex because it looked like a mirror, but it's not quite so, because it can also be flipped horizontally and vertically. So the real host tries to reach for the mirror image, but it goes through. So the hosts are, remember, the androids in the park, and they go through. They get through the mirror, no, and they change place with the mirror image at the other side, and they leave the robot behind, So it's a complex movie, it's a complex series, and it functions very much. You have the quotation there again from Foucault, heterotopia, because it makes this place that I occupy at the moment, where I look at myself in the glass, at once real, connected to the space that surrounds it, and also unreal, since in order to be perceived, it has to pass through this virtual point, which is over to the other side. So it's a very complex series. Just to finish, beyond the flat looking glass, remember that convex looking glass are important in our life. We have technologies such as 3D technology with the first movie, Avatar. And now we have what they are called mirror worlds, no? Worlds like Unreal Engine, Google Earth, Microsoft Virtual Earth, which are examples of 3D mirror worlds, no? And you have there a book on mirror worlds that are coming into our life. So conclusions. Our brain functions by making analogic connections. The ability to find commonalities and connections is a key aspect of analogical thinking, which involves recognizing similarities and patterns in unrelated situations. So, in other words, comparison. My lecture has been very comparative, as you've seen. So you're trying to trigger this, making you think about all these patterns, no? The mirror is possibly the most clearest example of visual analogy, and you see a reflection of yourself or of an object, and analogically you may see patterns or similarities between these aspects, but you can also reveal what is not apparent, such as flaws or hidden details. So artistic creation sometimes tries to show these connections, and that they can be broken, and they use strange analogies, no? So this also happens with non-flat mirrors that reflect things in unfamiliar ways, and they can help uncover hidden insights and unrelated things. The metaphor of the mirror then can be linked to analogic thinking through the concepts of reflection, self-reflection, uncovering hidden insights, amplifying understanding, and changing perspectives. So let us return to speculation. Again, remember, from speculum, mirror, speculation. So let us imagine there is a natural principle of mirroring. According to this principle, when you encounter something in your life, such a situation is a reflection of yourself. And not acknowledging its existence doesn't make it disappear. Instead, it recursively intensifies until it becomes impossible to ignore it or deny it. So it's better to deal with problems while they are still manageable, because ignoring them will lead to bigger challenges. So if you want to make a change in your world, you have to start now. Looking into social media, for example, in a universe governed by mirroring, when you choose to acknowledge and engage with the reflections before you, their power will transform into an undeniable force, propelling you towards growth and transformation. So we need to be aware of all these elements in order to make a little change in our worlds that will replicate, they will recursively increase, for example, to help climate change, sustainability, and many, many issues. And I finish with a little poem that I made. and about analogy, mirrors, and dreams that you could read. So thank you very much for listening to my lecture. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, you can send them to me by email. Thank you very much.